Alright people, so welcome to Jumbo IS and welcome to our lecture series on current affairs. Now today we are going to cover international relations related current affairs. So all the IR related news items which were dominant in the past 1 week shall be covered in today's lecture, okay? All the IR related news items which are relevant for your UPSC examination. Now let me say this again, make this lecture series a part of your daily routine. It should be a daily habit of yours. Every day this lecture would drop at 9 p.m. So all your week's current affairs with respect to that particular subject would be covered in one lecture, and the lecture won't be of more than 30 minutes. So 30 minutes of your day, but that would really serve you well. Make it a daily habit. All right then. Let's begin today's discussion. But first, let's take a look at the list of topics that we shall cover today. Okay, so let's begin. So current affairs, IR, July part 4, and here are the topics. So we'll be covering basically 3 topics. Topic number 1 is related to India's increased dependence on Russian oil because the Gulf, the Middle East is troubled. So we will talk about the pros and cons of this increased dependence on Russian oil. Then topic number 2 is US nuclear deal with Saudi Arabia. Now this will have huge geopolitical ramifications. In fact, Iran is suspecting that USA is supplying, through this deal, USA is supplying Saudi Arabia with nuclear weapons to deter Iran only. So we'll talk about this. And the third news item is with respect to India-Australia uranium deal. As you all know, uranium is a nuclear fuel. So this deal would make India more confident as far as its energy mix is concerned. Okay, this would make strengthen our nuclear capacity. So we'll talk about the pros and cons of this deal as well. Okay, so these are the 3 news items that we shall zero in our attention on. So let's start discussing them one by one, starting with topic number 1, and that is India's increased dependence on Russian oil. You all know that there is trouble in the Strait of Hormuz. Now, Houthis, which are based in Yemen, which is very close to Bab al-Mandab Strait, which is very close to Red Sea route. In fact, ships passing through Red Sea cross Bab al-Mandab Strait. Now, Houthis are aligned with Iran, and Houthis have specifically decided to target Saudi ships. So whatever oil that India was buying from Saudi Arabia, first Strait of Hormuz was blocked, because of which Saudis couldn't use that route. So Saudis were using an alternative trade route, okay, Bab al-Mandab Strait. Now that is also being blocked by Houthis. Now Saudis are searching for a third route, which is Cape of Good Hope route, but that is way longer, and that would, the transit time is way more. Therefore, given that there is trouble in Middle East, India has increased its crude oil purchases from Russia. Again, like I said before, it has its own set of advantages and disadvantages. So let's inquire into this. Okay, so let's begin. So India's increased dependence on Russian oil. So take a look at this map. Okay, as you know, this is already troubled. Okay, so earlier India used to buy oil from, the ships would cross Strait of Hormuz. So UAE's oil, Kuwait's oil, Saudi Arabia's oil would pass from Strait of Hormuz. But now Strait of Hormuz is troubled. So, Saudi Arabia created a pipeline known as the East-West pipeline. The ships would fill their tankers with crude oil from this pipeline and then cross this strait and then go to India. Now, this is Bab al-Mandab Strait, and this is Yemen, and this territory of Yemen is controlled by Houthi forces who are proxies of Iran. So they would do what Iran would say. They have decided to block or bombard Saudi ships. Now this route is also blocked. Okay, so Middle East is troubled waters for India, and India's purchases of crude oil from Middle East is really problematic now. Now you should remember a few facts. Number 1, 88% of India's crude oil requirements are met through imports. Okay, and most of this import was sourced from Gulf countries. Now this is troubled. Okay, so first of all, energy cost, energy supply is a huge casualty. But this problem is not confined to energy supply alone, because this bombardment raises shipping costs. Ships passing through these routes, okay, and these ships can be carrying, or these ships are actually carrying other goods other than crude oil. Okay, all the other ships also which are involved in trade of other goods would also increase their shipping costs. You know why? Because all international ships go for insurance. Now, if there is trouble, if there is security related issues, this insurance cost increases. So there would be significant rise in insurance premiums. Transportation costs would increase. So whatever India is importing from these routes, everything would become expensive. Inflation is going to be a huge problem for India. This is going to be a huge problem. Clear? Now, Saudi Arabia is hell-bent on selling its oil to its eastern neighbors, including India. So Saudi Arabia has searched or has found another route, okay, which goes around Africa, the entire Africa. That is known as the Cape of Good Hope route. But that is a very long route. It will take 3-4 more weeks to in transit time if Saudi Arabia chooses this Cape of Good Hope route. So this is the problem. Given these circumstances, India has decided to go for Russia. Okay, so this is the thing. Strategic buffer from Russia. To offset disruptions from West Asia, Indian refiners have scaled up purchases of Russian crude, cementing Moscow as India's largest oil supplier. Back again. Okay, because of fear of Donald Trump's sanctions, India reduced its crude oil supplies from Russia and started buying more from Saudi Arabia. Now India cannot buy from Saudi Arabia, so India has to go towards Russia. Okay. Safe route dynamics. Russian oil shipments moving through Red Sea route. So whatever ships from Russia which are moving through Red Sea, well, they are not being targeted by Houthis. So it is a safe route as of now. Volume escalation. Russian crude imports rose sharply, fulfilling over half of India's total crude import requirements. So half of India's total imports with respect to crude oil are coming from Russia now. Plus, India is not overly relying on Russia. We are still looking for our West Asian counterparts, okay? Alternative West Asian arteries. Indian refiners have utilized non-disrupted West Asian grades like UAE, because you see UAE is also building a pipeline to Oman, and over here there is Duqm port, which bypasses everything. And from here you can supply oil to India. So India is relying on this. Plus, Saudi Arabia's east-west Yanbu pipeline. If this conflict with Bab el-Mandab Strait in the Bab el-Mandab Strait stops, then this pipeline would be really useful. East-west pipeline known as the Yanbu pipeline. Clear? So yes, Russia is coming out to be a major winner in all of this. But our significant reliance on Russian crude is not short of its own set of challenges. Now, what challenges will India face if India relies heavily on Russia? Number one, disappearance of discounts. You see, earlier during the Russia-Ukraine war, in the early phase of the war, when India was relying heavily on Russia, well, back then Russia was offering steep discounts, which India took advantage of, reducing its import bill. Those discounts have vanished. Then, Russia also supplies crude oil, okay? And Russia uses Black Sea for it. Saudi Arabia is using, Persian Gulf or Red Sea. Russia is using Black Sea. But Black Sea is also vulnerable. Why? Because of the Russia-Ukraine war. Now, the thing is that Saudi Arabia has alternatives. If Persian Gulf is blocked, it will go for Red Sea. If Red Sea is blocked, Cape of Good Hope route. But if Black Sea is blocked, tomorrow USA decides to help Ukraine, help them enough to block Black Sea, well, then India would be stranded. Russia cannot supply crude oil to anyone. Okay? Plus domestic refined backfill. The thing is, because of war, Russia is short of fuel. So basically what Russia has done is that Russia has kept some Russian crude oil for itself. So it is exporting very little amount. Okay? And already India is facing steep buying competition from Turkey, China. They are ready buyers for Russian crude oil. And Russia has reduced its exports of crude oil because it needs to supply its own domestic economy. Already there are huge orders placed by Turkey and China. So this is another vulnerability. Okay. Now here is the table basically comparing West Asian route and Russian Black Sea route. It is a comparison. It is a table basically comprising of facts which we have already discussed. Now this table would help you revise this information, whatever we have discussed in this particular topic. So, well, go through this table. It is given in your notes. All right. Now, what is the way forward for India? Well, diversify your oil markets. Okay. Diversify from Middle East and Russia. Go towards Atlantic Basin, like buy oil from North America, Latin America, Venezuela. Diversify your oil markets. Then expand strategic petroleum reserves. India needs to expand its capacity of strategic petroleum reserves. These are those reserves where India saves its crude oil for future emergencies. So expand its capacity. Then long-term freight and insurance hedging. Remember, I told you because of insurance premiums, well, shipping costs have increased. Well, India should increase the capacity of its own national insurers, Indian insurance companies, so that these insurance companies won't charge hefty premiums for on to Indian ships. Okay, so we can save on this if insurance companies are, well, Indian. Okay, so this is the thing. This is the way forward. Remember this way forward, right? All right. Now let's quickly shift our focus to next news item, and that is US nuclear deal with Saudi Arabia. Now you see, well, there is conflict in West Asia. It's because of Iran. And the reason for this conflict is that both USA and Israel fear that Iran is going to nuclearize itself. Iran is on its way to get nuclear weapons. Okay. Now, if Iran gets nuclear weapons, it destabilizes the entire West Asian region. You know why? Because Iran does not only have strategic rivalry with Israel, Iran has a strategic rivalry with Saudi Arabia. And if Iran gets nuclear weapons, well, Saudi Arabia definitely will get paranoid. Saudi Arabia is already paranoid. So if Iran nuclearizes in future, Saudi wants its security to be intact. They also want nuclear weapons. Now, generally people speculate that they are using Pakistan's nuclear umbrella for their own security. But they want to be self-reliant in that area because they don't think Pakistan is a reliable partner, defense partner. Therefore, USA and Saudi Arabia have signed a nuclear deal. As per that nuclear deal, USA or US companies would supply nuclear fuel, nuclear reactors, all these equipments would be supplied to Saudi Arabia. Now, both countries are saying that this deal is for civilian purposes. But people fear, Iran fears, and many geopolitical experts fear that through this agreement, while Saudi Arabia is also trying to get on the path of getting nuclear weapons, and USA is helping Saudi Arabia on this. Clear? This is the allegation. So let's investigate what this deal is all about, okay, and also investigate the fears of geopolitical destabilization. So let's begin. So US nuclear deal with Saudi Arabia. Now, United States and Kingdom of Saudi Arabia signed a landmark 30-year civilian nuclear cooperation agreement alongside a bilateral safeguard agreement. Okay, executed under Section 123 of US Atomic Energy Act of 1954. Hence, this agreement is known as the 123 agreement. Okay, because, well, whenever USA has a nuclear agreement with any country, that agreement is signed as per Section 123 of US Atomic Energy Act. In fact, US-India civilian nuclear deal is also called 123 agreement. So, well, Saudi Arabia has signed this agreement. Now, well, US-Saudi Nuclear Pact 123 agreement. So, strategic and commercial objectives, multi-billion-dollar deal for US nuclear exports, diversifies Saudi energy grid beyond crude oil. So, currently, Saudi Arabia produces electricity from crude oil. Saudi Arabia is saying that we want to produce nuclear electricity, and that is why we are having this deal. Reasserts US strategic influence over China and Russia. US's influence over Saudi Arabia. Okay, but there are risks. Number one risk is departure from gold standard. As per 123 agreement, any country which signs a nuclear deal with USA has to go for this gold standard. Basically promise that they are not going to use all of this for producing nuclear weapons. Saudi Arabia has categorically refused. Saudi Arabia is saying, we will sign this agreement, but we won't go for gold standard. Plus, under this agreement, domestic uranium enrichment flexibility. So Saudi Arabia won't buy uranium from USA. It will buy raw uranium from USA, but can enrich it on its own soil. USA is going to supply enrichment facilities also. And this is the biggest fear, because if Saudi Arabia has enrichment facilities, it can enrich uranium to weapons grade and produce nuclear weapons, which will destabilize West Asia. This is the fear. Okay. Now, some information about 123 agreement. So, it is a mandatory legal prerequisite before any significant US civil nuclear technology, material, equipment can be transferred to foreign nation. Okay. This is a mandatory agreement before any exports, nuclear exports to any country. The duration of the pact is 30 years. Peaceful use safeguards. It mandates that transfer technology and materials remain strictly under non-military civilian oversight. Plus, US Congress, US legislature, well, it will do a congressional review. They will review the entire situation for 90 days before any exports take place. So American legislature, not just American president, American legislature is going to keep an oversight over this. Now, people say that this agreement is a departure from gold standard. Now, you know what gold standard is? A comparable agreement was signed with UAE in 2009. They agreed to gold standard, but not Saudi Arabia. Now, if Saudi Arabia is rejecting gold standard, they are also rejecting additional safeguards to prevent nuclear weapons of International Atomic Energy Agency. Saudis have refused this additional protocol as well. India also accepted. Okay. Now, what are the vulnerabilities? What are the risks? Dual use fuel cycle risk. Saudi Arabia, because it will have enrichment facilities, can enrich this uranium to weapons grade. If they do, it will lead to regional arm race between Iran and Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia has categorically refused International Atomic Energy Agency's safeguards, inspections. They won't inspect their facilities. Definitely, they are doing something suspicious. Otherwise, if they were not, they would have allowed IAEA's inspections. This is the thing. Now, in your notes, I've shared this table. In this table, we are comparing US nuclear deal with UAE, with Saudi Arabia, and with India. Okay. So, well, UAE and India nuclear deal are more or less similar. Saudi Arabia has been given this extra exemptions. So, do check this table out. Basically, it's related to gold standard only. Right? All right. Now, let's quickly shift our focus to last news item of the day, and that is India-Australia uranium deal. You see, the thing is that, well, India was put under heavy sanctions when India did Pokhran, its second nuclear test in 1998. Because of those sanctions, nobody was ready to export nuclear fuel to India. But after US-India nuclear deal and India getting this specific waiver from sanctions, well, now countries are legally allowed to export nuclear fuel to India. The thing is that India does require nuclear fuel. Which nuclear fuel? Uranium. Why? Because India is expanding its nuclear power generation capacities, nuclear electricity generation capacities. And uranium in India is number one of low grade, and number two, we do not have enough uranium. So if we are serious about expanding our nuclear power capacities, we need uranium from other countries. Canada has come to the picture. We have agreements with Canada. We have agreements with Kazakhstan also. Kazakhstan also produces a lot of uranium. And now we have signed this agreement with Australia. Okay. Basically, we are securing our fuel supply for nuclear power generation. It has got nothing to do with nuclear weapons, only nuclear fuel for electricity. So let's take a look at this agreement. Okay. So India-Australia uranium deal. Okay. Now look, you need to know this. There is raw uranium. That raw uranium is processed, properly processed, and we create uranium oxide. This uranium oxide is called yellow cake. Okay. Now, this uranium oxide is usable as nuclear fuel. So, India is directly importing this. We are not importing raw uranium. We are importing yellow cake. Clear? Now, this agreement with Australia has followed the agreement with Canada and Kazakhstan. So, New Delhi's strategic push to secure nuclear fuel supplies. Now, India's civil nuclear capacity. Why do we need nuclear fuel? Our current operational capacity is 8.7 gigawatts. By 2047, we need 100 gigawatts of nuclear energy. Our domestic fuel capacity covers only 2.4 gigawatts. Okay. So, out of these 8.7 gigawatts, the uranium found in India can only support 2.4 gigawatts. We need to import extra uranium for this 6.3 gigawatts. Okay. So, this is the thing. This is the problem. And that is why we need to import. We have very little uranium with ourselves. Plus, the uranium we have also has certain problems. India holds estimated domestic uranium oxide reserves across 47 deposits in Andhra Pradesh, Jharkhand. But there are severe constraints. First of all, our uranium oxide is of low grade. Then, cost disparity. A Ministry of Power Committee report highlighted that mining and processing domestic uranium into uranium oxide costs 3 to 4 times higher than procuring uranium oxide yellow cake directly. So if India has raw uranium and it produces yellow cake, uranium oxide, the cost of this entire operation is 3 to 4 times more than directly importing yellow cake from Canada, Australia. So we are going to go for this if we want to save costs. And supply capacity, we have discussed this. India only has enough uranium to fuel 2.4 gigawatts. The remaining needs to be imported. Clear? Now, India's sourcing architecture. Remember this, the 2008 nuclear supply group, because before this, before 2008, no country could have sold uranium to India. India was under sanctions. But all these uranium exporting countries have a group called nuclear supplier groups. India got an exemption, waiver. India is not a signatory to NSG, yet India got an exemption. And because India got this exemption, well, now countries are open, internationally allowed to sell uranium to India. Okay. Now, India has two reactors, nuclear reactors, pressurized heavy water reactors. Fuel is yellow cake. Okay. Domestic sources, Uranium Corporation of India Limited mines, but we have foreign suppliers as well. Then we have light water reactors as well. That requires enriched uranium. Uranium, this yellow cake needs to be enriched. India doesn't produces any of it. Okay. 100% imported. 100% imported from these countries, enriched uranium, for civilian purposes. Okay. Though we have enrichment capacities for weapons grade. So this is the thing. Clear? Now again, there is a table for quick revision. Domestic uranium, comparison between domestic uranium, Indian uranium and foreign uranium. So we have discussed most of the things. Do take a look at this. Clear? And that would be all. So with that, we conclude today's session. So thank you so much for watching, everyone. And I'm sure it has added value to your preparation. Now it will add more value if you're number one, consistent and regular with this lecture series. And number two, you revise this lecture from the notes provided by us, because otherwise you'll quickly forget these current affairs. So take the necessary 15 minutes and do this necessary revision. Okay, essential revision, critical revision. On that note, I shall take your leave with the promise of seeing you again with another set of news items. Thank you, everyone.